Listen, if you don't have anything to say, you blab. You just go on and 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 on.
Voters do not agree with these despicable women on The View. They are wildly out of touch with the vast majority of Americans, and frankly, they should seek immediate...
Get ready for this, Karoline. Karoline Leavitt didn't hold back one bit when she went head-to-head with Whoopi Goldberg. This wasn't a simple clapback, it was a full-blown takedown, and Whoopi looked completely blindsided. You could practically read the shock on her face, like she instantly regretted speaking up. Leavitt was unstoppable, bold, unapologetic, and dropping hard-hitting truths like it's second nature. And trust me, the reactions that follow are absolutely priceless. Let's jump in.
Like to talk about Joe Biden and Donald Trump, who you work for.
I am stating facts that your colleagues have stated in the past.
Okay,
now, as
I'm
for
sorry,
this
guys.
debate,
We're going to come back out to the panel. Karoline, thank you very much for your time.
Whoopi Goldberg has long ruled The View like a seasoned queen bee, confident, untouchable, and always ready to spar. Alongside Sunny Hostin, she's part of a panel famous for sharp takes and no-holds-barred opinions, even when discussing controversial figures like Donald Trump. But there's one guest who seems to shake things up like no other, Karoline Leavitt. Just 27, Leavitt has quickly become a formidable challenger, pushing back with pointed remarks that often leave the hosts scrambling for a response. For critics, these exchanges feel less like conversation and more like a knockout punch. The tension all began in classic dramatic fashion. Joy Behar made a dismissive comment, implying that Leavitt's fast rise owed more to her looks than her skills, a line that immediately set the stage for the showdown that followed.
We've been put in there because according to Donald Trump, she's a 10. You know that's what it is.
I want to be clear, though, it's not her first job. It was her first press briefing. She worked in the previous Trump administration.
What I'm saying, this is the first time that she's been she may be, but my point is that job would not maybe have been open to her.
No, I understand.
It seems that whenever a young conservative woman achieves success, some are quick to chalk it up to her looks, and the hosts leaned right into that assumption. Then Whoopi Goldberg confidently chimed in, claiming that Karoline Leavitt's rise wouldn't have happened without the influence of voices like those on The View. Yes, really, that Leavitt somehow owes her success to the very panel that often critiques her. Critics couldn't help but find the statement ironic, especially coming from Goldberg, who has her own history of awkward debate moments. But the story truly heats up with what happened next. Leavitt didn't let the remark slide. She fired back, and supporters say her response didn't just push back against the criticism, it flipped the script entirely. Hold on tight, because that's when the drama really takes off.
Watching this clip, I couldn't help but think how ironic that Whoopi Goldberg and Joy Behar and the rest of the ladies on The View spend their time calling Republicans the conspiracy theorists. But they have been wrong about everything they have said over the last couple of years. They likened President Trump to Hitler. They have mocked him. They have shamed him. They have lied about him consistently on their show. And it was a joy to watch them on November the 6th when they realized that tens of millions of Americans do not listen to the lie viewed. These women are completely out of touch with reality.
For those who think someone is completely out of touch, many point straight at Whoopi Goldberg. In 2025, critics say it's baffling that she's still leaning on the tired notion that a woman's success is tied to her looks, a mindset they consider decades out of date. To them, it wasn't just a sly jab. It came across as the frustration of someone struggling to stay relevant as new voices rise. Supporters of Karoline Leavitt, on the other hand, argue that her achievements come from confidence, preparation, and a resume built entirely through her own effort. When someone like Leavitt steps into the spotlight, they say, critics often misread talent as a threat. The controversy didn't end with a remark about appearance. Goldberg reportedly went further, claiming that Leavitt's success somehow depended on the guidance of The View's panel, a bold suggestion that many observers found eyebrow-raising, given the show's history of critiquing conservative figures. And just when it seemed like the peak of tension had passed, Goldberg's next reaction reportedly pushed the exchange from a heated debate to something far more dramatic.
Listen, if you don't have anything to say, you blab. You just go on and 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 on.
This moment really hits a nerve. There's nothing wrong with challenging someone's ideas. That's how healthy debates work. But when a person can't engage with the argument and instead resorts to personal digs, it comes off as a cheap shot. Critics argue that's exactly what happened when Whoopi Goldberg brushed aside Karoline Leavitt's points and shifted the focus to mocking her speaking style. Goldberg appeared dismissive, waving off Leavitt's argument as if it didn't even deserve a response. Instead of addressing the substance, the conversation pivoted to delivery and presentation, something Leavitt supporters saw as a clear attempt to dodge the real debate. The twist came when Leavitt refused to let it slide. She fired back with a response that many say completely turned the tables, transforming a dismissive jab into a confrontation Goldberg likely didn't anticipate. According to viewers following the exchange, that comeback is when the situation truly exploded.
Not agree with these despicable women on The View. They are wildly out of touch with the vast majority of Americans, and frankly, they should seek immediate.
Some say Karoline Leavitt's remarks were fiery, but her supporters insist it was just straightforward honesty. After years of controversy, critics often question why The View is still on the air. From their perspective, the show has long relied on predictable outrage, scripted laughter, and an audience that reacts on cue whenever hosts like Whoopi Goldberg or Joy Behar hit familiar talking points. These critics also argue that the panel has delivered some of the most provocative statements ever heard on daytime TV, comments that, to detractors, sometimes verge on satire. On top of that, the show has faced ongoing legal and reputational challenges, adding another layer of drama. Against this backdrop, Leavitt's call-out didn't read as a shocking attack to her supporters. It felt like a long-overdue reality check for a program they see as having dodged accountability for far too long.
This young lady this is her first job, I would like her to do a little homework. Because she said something yesterday that really pissed me off. And that was, she said, there will be no wokeness here.
Oh, yeah.
Let me explain something to you. Because without that wokeness, you might not have that job.
Yeah.
Because women were not invited to that table. Women were not invited to many tables in this nation. The reason we fought and busted our behinds to make sure that you didn't have to worry about this. And now to hear you talk about it and to hear anybody talk about the wokeness was put in place for a reason.
When Whoopi Goldberg realized that mocking Karoline Leavitt's speaking style had completely backfired, critics say she quickly shifted tactics, something commentators often do when their first move doesn't land. The focus suddenly turned to the substance of the argument itself. By then, Leavitt had already made her stance clear. She called for an end to White House press briefings filled with buzzwords, performative outrage, and culture war theatrics. In her view, policy debates should return to common-sense reasoning, where decisions are evaluated based on logic and practical outcomes, not on how well they play on social media or align with political trends. Supporters say that message clearly struck a nerve. Observers claim Goldberg visibly faltered during the discussion. But rather than stepping back, she reportedly doubled down, insisting that so-called wokeness wasn't the problem, and even suggesting it had played a role in Leavitt's rise. Critics found this deeply ironic. A 27-year-old conservative politician supposedly owes her success to the very ideology she frequently critiques. To them, the core point of the debate was completely missed. Leavitt responded once more, and many viewers felt that the exchange had reached its peak drama. Yet the story didn't end there. Another clip circulating online shows Goldberg and the studio audience reacting to a moment when a CNN journalist interrupted Leavitt, sparking a fresh wave of criticism and commentary.
I'm going to stop this interview if you continue to attack my colleagues. I would like to talk about Joe Biden and Donald Trump, who you work for.
I am stating facts that your colleagues have stated in the past.
Okay,
now,
I'm sorry, guys. We're going to come back out to the panel. Caroline, thank you very much for your time.
What Whoopi Goldberg said next struck critics as not just unusual, but downright baffling. Then again, many argue moments like this are exactly what viewers expect from The View. Anyone tuning in hoping for a serious policy discussion might feel like they accidentally switched to the wrong kind of show. Observers note that after decades in the spotlight, hosting the program, producing projects, and acting in countless films, Goldberg has more than enough experience on television. Yet critics argue her on-air responses often follow the same familiar pattern. The same talking points, dramatic gestures, and tone of moral certainty. To them, it feels less like a fresh debate and more like a replay. This time, the remark that drew the most attention was her claim that rejecting wokeness, as Leavitt argued, could somehow be dangerous for young women. Critics found it a surprising, and even ironic, assertion, implying that promoting independent thinking and merit-based success might be harmful to detractors. The moment reinforced the perception that the show sometimes generates more heat than clarity. And according to viewers watching closely, The tension only escalated when Leavitt fired back again, delivering a comeback that supporters say completely turned the tables on Goldberg.
That was so good. Afterwards, this young lady claimed her, quote, on-air snub proves that you-know-who will not be treated fairly in the upcoming debate. Now, do you think this is going to make people doubt whether CNN can stay objective, or is this more the same of, everybody's against me, it's all rigged, I tell you. Is everything rigged?
No, it's their MO. That's what they do. Rachel Maddow said last week, she's like, if the election is lost, it was rigged. If there's a debate, then the moderators are probably biased and they're prejudiced against.
The room reportedly fell silent the moment Whoopi Goldberg began speaking. The tension was palpable, as if everyone was bracing for another explosive comment. But instead of sticking to the debate, Goldberg pivoted, bringing up Donald Trump. Critics weren't shocked. In heated political exchanges, it's common for stalled arguments to shift toward broader associations rather than addressing the point directly. Goldberg suggested that Karoline Leavitt's views were influenced by Trump, implying her positions weren't entirely her own. To Leavitt supporters, it read as a classic deflection, less about policy and more about linking her arguments to a controversial figure. Leavitt, however, stayed composed. Observers note she even smiled slightly before responding. Rather than trading insults, she steered the discussion back to policy, focusing on government spending and federal priorities. She argued that the administration should prioritize practical economic concerns and budget discipline over wasteful or symbolic initiatives. Leavitt highlighted programs she saw as unnecessary expenditures, including federal internal language guidance efforts and certain academic funding areas. Her point was clear: taxpayers shouldn't foot the bill for projects driven by ideology rather than practicality. The reaction in the room was striking. According to accounts, the normally outspoken View panel paused, and the discussion quieted. Whether viewers agreed or disagreed, the sudden silence suggested that the exchange had reached one of its most intense and commanding moments.
A disgusting speech that any president, certainly in my lifetime, has ever given. He essentially waged war on half of the country by saying that we are all a threat to democracy because we believe in putting America first. It's not radical to want to put your country and your own people first. It's not radical to want to have a strong border, a strong military, and to unleash the might of your own economy, not economies around the world.
Karoline Leavitt isn't just intelligent. She's razor-sharp, articulate, and always seems several steps ahead. Critics say it's almost disheartening that the hosts on The View chose to mock her instead of recognizing her abilities, but for many observers, it's easy to understand why. Some argue it's purely partisan. Any conservative voice might receive the same treatment, but supporters see something more personal. If Leavitt were just another predictable bureaucrat, the hosts reportedly wouldn't give her a second thought. At 27, she's accomplished, confident, and unshaken by their antics, outclassing them in poise, presence, and sharpness. Observers note that's why the panel often fixates on her age or appearance, as if competence comes with an expiration date. Critics describe it as playground-level pettiness disguised as commentary. Yet every attempt to undermine her only seems to elevate her further, proving that while the hosts are stuck sniping from the sidelines, Leavitt is busy making moves, and winning on her own terms.
Seen cultural Marxism trickling its way through every institution in this country. The public school system, the higher education university system, Hollywood, big tech, the corrupt mainstream media that I fought against in President Trump's White House are indoctrinating my generation of Americans into hating our country, hating one another based on race and gender and all of this other BS, quite.
Whoopi Goldberg, usually the one dominating every discussion on The View, interrupting, ridiculing, and steamrolling opposing voices, suddenly looked rattled. The host who often commanded the room now sat tense, almost as if startled by a ghost. And in a way, she had been. Across from her sat Karoline Leavitt. Goldberg glanced at Joy Behar, perhaps hoping a few tired jokes about Donald Trump might ease the tension, but by that point, all eyes, and all pressure, were firmly on Leavitt.
Just yelled out Trump to me, like some kind of weird, what do you call it? Like a blurt.
Outburst?
Just like a blurt to me, like I'm supposed to understand what that means, which I do.
The audience laughed, but it wasn't the carefree kind. It was tense, strained, the kind of nervous chuckle people give when they don't know what else to do. Even Joy Behar, usually the show's comic relief, tried to lighten the mood, but her joke fell flat, awkward, clunky, and painfully mistimed. Instead of easing the tension, it only highlighted it. The usual mock, dismiss, move on routine that the panel relied on wasn't working this time. Whoopi Goldberg, normally quick with a sarcastic quip or dismissive gesture, looked visibly shaken. Observers say the exchange with Karoline Leavitt didn't just bruise her ego, it reportedly rattled her confidence. With Behar's punchline failing and the audience too uneasy to follow along, Goldberg had no lifeline. Critics described it as a rare moment of defeat, like a prizefighter forced to throw in the towel. Leavitt, however, didn't just hold her ground, she dominated the discussion. At 27, the press secretary delivered a performance that supporters say showcased poise, clarity, and precision, leaving Goldberg outmatched and outclassed. Commentators note this wasn't an isolated moment. Leavitt reportedly continues to challenge and hold accountable reporters and media figures she sees as pushing performative narratives, making this exchange just one example of her taking full control of the conversation.
In this administration are committed to ensuring that these individuals get the funding that they need. And I would just say a strong message to Democrats who are out there pretending to be outraged about the long list of crap that this administration is cutting, federal waste and funding, like $2 million for sex changes in Guatemala, $6 million to fund tourism in Egypt, $20 million on a new Sesame Street show in Iraq, $4.5 million to combat disinformation in Kazakhstan. I could go on, and I'm happy to provide this list to every single one of you.
The setup was classic media bait and switch. A reporter, seemingly aiming to corner Karoline Leavitt, asked why Donald Trump appeared unbothered by California's wildfires while pushing to cut funding for certain state departments. It was the kind of gotcha question designed to cast Trump as heartless and out of touch, but Leavitt didn't flinch. Observers note that she answered with calm precision, slicing through the narrative like a hot knife through butter. "It's about priorities," she said, her tone sharp and deliberate. Critics highlight that she made her point clear. America faces mounting debt and reckless spending, and tough choices are necessary to prevent further strain. That, she explained, is why the administration targets non-essential funding, including programs she described as woke and ineffective. Supporters say the room fell silent as her logic landed. The reporter, expecting a stumble, reportedly blinked in surprise, while Whoopi Goldberg froze, caught off guard once again. Leavitt had flipped the script, transforming a question meant to trap her into a moment that exposed the weakness behind the outrage and underscored her command of the facts.
Advise the president on the legality of telling government agencies that they don't have to spend money that was already appropriated by Congress.
Well, as the OMB memo states, this is certainly within the confines of the law. So White House counsel's office believes that this is within the president's power to do it, and therefore he's doing it.
Okay, so they disagree with lawmakers who say that they don't have the power to freeze this funding.
Again, I would point you to the language in the memo that clearly states this is within the law.
And all that happened on Friday night. The administration fired several inspectors general without giving Congress the 30-day legally required notification that they were being fired. I think only 2 were left at DHS and the DOJ. And then yesterday we saw several prosecutors, I believe 12, fired from the Justice Department who worked on the investigations into the president. As you know, they are career prosecutors, therefore they are afforded civil service protections. How is the administration deciding which laws to follow and which ones to ignore?
So it is the belief of this White House and the White House counsel's office that the president was within his executive authority to do that. He is the executive of the executive branch, and therefore he has the power to fire anyone within the executive branch.
The bottom line, the president has every right to remove anyone who isn't doing the job they were hired to do. It's professional, not personal. When someone fails to fulfill their responsibilities, especially when it costs taxpayers, it's game over. Critics argue that so-called woke reporters overreact in these moments, rushing to defend ideological allies in public office with dramatic headlines and exaggerated commentary. Supporters, however, insist that Donald Trump isn't here to coddle incompetence or maintain a buddy system that shields mediocrity. The principle is straightforward. You're hired based on merit, and you're held accountable based on results. Trump, they say, is simply exercising that authority as the Constitution allows. Observers also point out the double standard. If a Democrat took the same action, many of these same reporters would praise it as accountability. But because it's Trump, it sparks outrage. Supporters argue he isn't interested in participation trophies or safe spaces. He's focused on fixing what's broken. If that means removing underperforming staff, so be it.
ICE has made so far since President Trump came back into office. Can you just tell us the numbers? How many have a criminal record versus those who are just in the country illegally?
All of them, because they illegally broke our nation's laws and therefore they are criminals as far as this administration goes. I know the last administration didn't see it that way, so it's a big culture shift in our nation to view someone who breaks our immigration laws as a criminal, but that's
And just like that, it was game, set, match. Karoline Leavitt didn't just survive the ambush, she obliterated it. Observers say Whoopi Goldberg, Joy Behar, and the rest of the panel were left scrambling. There were no theatrics, no cheap shots, just facts, delivered with the precision of a surgeon and the impact of a freight train. The takeaway? Competence wins, victimhood loses. Critics argue the hosts of The View learned the hard way that they had picked the wrong opponent. Trump's team, supporters say, is here to clean house, and Leavitt appears to be exactly the right person for the job. For those following the showdown, the message is clear. Facts, preparation, and courage carry the day.